אוקיי, הוא הולך להביא משקפיים. He went to get his glasses.
Okay, in the meantime, I'll give everybody a welcome. Thanks for coming. If you're having trouble hearing or seeing, log back in again. We've had some technical difficulties. Welcome. If you don't want to be seen or don't want to be heard, you can take off the video or mute yourself. But I do encourage people to stay tuned, not mute, and you can make comments or ask questions as we go, as long as they're on target with the topic. So for those that haven't been here before, this is an exploration of the teachings of Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, as well as other scholars on meditation. Rabbi Kaplan has written extensively on the role meditation plays in Jewish life, and basically it comes down to this. Meditation is the foundation of Jewish spirituality. It is through meditation that we connect to God, to the soul, to the nefesh, neshama, the ruach. It is through meditation that we successfully have tefillah, that we pray. It is through meditation that we transcend the physical into a spiritual realm. It is through meditation that we make life meaningful. And as we've seen in the last few months, there are numerous examples of this. But unfortunately, for reasons we've discussed, meditation is basically not practiced in your typical Jewish community. There have been reasons for this, and they have to do with the fact that we lost our great prophets, we lost our great teachers of meditation. So Chazal, the sages at the time of the Second Temple, basically made a decision that said, we would rather not teach Jews a poor quality method of meditation for fear they'll just get tired of it and use it to pursue other gods. They were afraid Jews would get off the derech and pursue other forms of spirituality that weren't Jewish. So they decided to put it in a box. And as Rabbi Kaplan says, we have so many Jews now trying to pursue a spiritual path and connect to God and make their life meaningful through non-Jewish means. We have this yearning for it. So he kind of pioneered the efforts about 40 years ago to take our spiritual tradition out of the box and make it available through his writings. And so we're exploring those. And we're also exploring the commentaries of many other Jewish scholars on the topic, in addition to non-Jewish scholars. Rabbi Kaplan makes the point of saying that meditation is meditation is meditation, meaning that many nations and many cultures have had meditations, and their techniques are really the same as what our techniques are. But we have a huge diversity of meditation techniques. It's not just sitting on a cushion going Om, although that's one of them. We've had a huge array of them, and we have employed them all throughout our lives for ages. So we kind of took meditation to a very high level of social practice, which we kind of lost and which we're trying to get back to now. Okay. So that's what this is about. We go through the teachings. I'm going to show you my notes. I'm going to bring in different points of view. At the end, we're going to have a short meditation, which I'll walk you through, because you need to have a taste of what we're talking about to really understand what meditation is. It's basic, and I'm not here to be your meditation Rebbe or anything, but I can introduce you to what I know and I've been practicing for years. And you could take it from there. Some of you may be more advanced, and at least this will be a good refresher what the basics are. So let me start with the website. So you said you could see this. We have on the website, the link to which is on your texts and also your emails. We have all the class notes from prior sessions. We have the recordings of the classes on my YouTube channel. We have recommended reading list, which is being compiled week by week as we add more books that we review. You see them here. We have links to helpful websites. A lot of these Rebbeim and scholars I've referred to as I've compiled these class notes. In addition, you have the scholars from other cultures whose contributions we use in the class. We also have a blog, and on the blog, I'm posting different essays and articles that will help us have useful information to understand the principles and ideas we're discussing. Some of them are going to be mine. Some of them are longstanding scholars who are experts in certain areas. And you'll always find a synopsis of the current week's class on the homepage of the website. Feel free to make comments. Feel free to share. And I'm sure you'll find people who have some kind of yearning to understand this stuff and would like some guidance, and that's what we're here to do. Okay, so let us now go to the class notes. We'll start off with, hold on one second. Again, if you're having trouble, you really need to log back in. Let me just give that a text to a student here. Okay. We're starting off, we have 3 questions from last class. It seems like Abraham might have been the original critical thinker from what you said about his thoughts. Certainly Adam wasn't if he went along blindly with the snake and Eve. We'll discuss this and the 2 other questions prior to the meditation component of the class. In terms of the text, we're going to continue with the teachings of Rabbi Kaplan and start off where he continues talking about the Amidah as a meditation, the standing prayer, the pillar of our tefillot. And he makes a point of telling us that the Anshe Knesset Hagdalah, the sages at the time of the Second Temple and moving forward, who made the decision to not let meditative techniques be taught throughout the nation. In replacement of that, they established the standing prayer, the Amidah, which would be used as a meditation. And as we discussed in prior classes, they said the 18 blessings of the Amidah in an hour. They said one word every 7 seconds. So that shows to the extent to which they use it as a meditation. And all the components of the Amidah, from the position you assume, the standing position, to your mindset, to how you say the words, to the words you say, are themselves meditations. So Chazal gave us a set of meditations so that the entire experience would be meditative. Okay. We left off here. We left off in his explaining the first bracha and what the words mean and the ideas we're supposed to have when we say the words. We left off with the great, the mighty, and awesome God. So we're going to talk about that. Okay, this is what he says. When one says that God is great, Hagadol, in the Amidah, one should concentrate on greatness and immensity. Try to imagine how great God is. Think of the size of the largest thing you can imagine, then go further and try to imagine the size of the planet Earth. Continue and imagine the size of the sun, the solar system, the galaxy, and then the entire universe. Then realize how tiny this all is in comparison with the greatness of God. Compared with him, the entire universe is less than a mote of dust. This, of course, is contemplation on an intellectual level, and during the Amidah is not the time for such intellectualizing. When we say the expression, the great, we have to take the concept of greatness beyond the intellectual level. The mind expands with the concept of greatness and becomes aware of greatness and bigness in its purest and most abstract form. The concept of greatness reverberates through one's entire being, and one can then catch a glimpse of what it means in relation to God. Now, very clearly, Rabbi Kaplan was a very accomplished meditator. He was very advanced. And as you see in his writings, he led meditation groups. And as you can see, when he describes all the various forms of meditation, and we have many, which we're going to discuss, he was quite the practitioner. He was dedicated. He was dedicated to the practice of various types. So when he talks about these experiences, he felt this. So for him, davening the Amidah was an enlightening experience. Okay. So sometimes we have to kind of take that perspective, because for us, just reading this, it's not like we're going to automatically match the experience he had when he was meditating and when he was praying. Okay. But it's something to shoot for. But he's making an important point. When you say Hagadol, you're supposed to experience, somehow feel God's greatness. But he's also saying you can't just spend an hour trying to get that feeling. He says you have to have it ready-made. So that's telling us that there needs to be a certain amount of preparation and study and meditation that we do prior to saying the Amidah as a meditation, so that we can carry this feeling into the actual tefillah. Okay, and he talks about this. And that's a very important idea. You can't just like pop a pill and get the experience. And he actually makes the point of saying that, especially in America, people like to take the quick route and pop some LSD or something. He actually talks about that and get this rich spiritual experience. But as we've said in prior classes, your entire lifestyle should be based on trying to get this experience, not just when you're davening, but when you're performing any mitzvah, when you're doing anything, when you're preparing vegetables for Shabbat lunch type of thing. So it's a lifestyle. And if you dedicate your lifestyle to trying to achieve that experience, then you will get it in davening and everything else. Okay. In Kabbalah, God's greatness is closely associated with his love, or chesed. When we imagine an infinite being ready to listen to the voice of an infinitesimal creature like us, we realize that there can be no greater love. His point here is like, what's a great God like that doing with little creatures like us? It has to be based out of love. There's no other reason for God to actually make himself available to us. He doesn't need us. So he is who he is. We have nothing to offer him besides what he asks us to do. And that's a very common thing. Rabbi Foreman talks about that. God is in the love business, and the reason why he extends himself to us is out of love. Thus, in the greatness, there is also love. This is another reason that Abraham is associated with God's attribute of greatness and love. It is taught that Abraham directed his life to emulate God's love. Abraham was an important personage in his time with sufficient status to rub shoulders with kings and monarchs. Nevertheless, he would literally run to greet and serve the lowliest of wayfarers. As we talk about the story, when after his circumcision, 3 angels approached him. And as the Torah tells us, Abraham was in the midst of a conversation with God at that time. And he kind of said, God, hold on a second, put him on pause to greet the strangers. So Rabbi Kaplan is using Abraham as an example of love, especially for other people, especially people he didn't know. Okay. The next word is the mighty, Hagibor. When one says this word, one should think of God's strength. Earlier, I mentioned how one can look at one's hand and see the strength in it. That's another thing we'll cover. When one says the word the mighty, one should likewise concentrate on strength in its pure form. When one thinks about strength in terms of God, it expands until it overwhelms the mind. One then begins to have an inkling of strength as it applies to God. Now, he's kind of nebulous here, and there's a debate among the sages. When we say gevura, when we say strength, are we talking about spiritual strength or are we talking about physical strength? Like Shimshon, he was a gibor. He was physically mighty. Is that what we mean when we say gevura, or is gevura a spiritual strength? And soon we'll discuss what spiritual strength is. So Rabbi Kaplan, I know, holds by the idea that, of course, God is not physical. And since he's talking about meditation, I think he's talking about spiritual strength. And we will have to explore what that is. Okay, but for now, we'll talk about the third quality that we talk about with God. Finally, we say, and the awesome v'hanora. This emulates the experience of Jacob at Beit El after he saw the vision of God and the ladder, when he said, how awesome is this place? When one is aware of God's greatness and strength, one is overcome with a feeling of awe. Rather than being a frightening experience, it is a sweet and beautiful awe, the awe that comes from standing in the presence of the infinite. Okay, and by the way, we had a question a number of weeks ago that a lot of sages talk about fear of God. Why would we have to fear God? And here's an idea that when we talk about fear, we're really talking about awe, and obviously the Hebrew word applies to both. So we're going to get an idea of what that is. Since Rabbi Kaplan mentions Jacob and his latter dream as a way of understanding awe, we're going to take a look actually at that portion of the Torah and get some insights into what is this awesomeness that we're talking about with relation to God. So I'm going to give you a view of another screen. Just hold on a quick second. Okay, now. Okay. Very good. So now,
אני נעלמת כל הזמן.
יושבת על כיסא נדל"ן.
כן. יש עוד משהו.
all right, can everybody see this section of the Chumash? Where this is from, you see the Hebrew on the left and the English on the right? Okay, so this is the time when Jacob is heading towards Haran. He leaves Beersheba. Okay. So what happens? He goes to a place, he stays there all night. The sun is set, he takes a stone, he puts it under his head, and he goes to sleep. And then he dreams, and there's a ladder set up on earth, and the top of it reaches to heaven, and the angels of God are ascending and descending on it. Okay, bear that in mind. And then Hashem appears, and he says, I'm the Lord, the God of Abraham, thy father, and the God of Isaac. He introduces, remember me? Your daddy and your granddaddy told you about me. The land that you lie, I'm going to give this to you and your progeny. And your seed will be so plentiful, you'll be like the dust of the earth. And you shall spread across to the west and the east and the north and the south. And all the families of the earth will be blessed because of your family. And I'm with you, and I'm going to keep you, and I'll bring you back to this land, and I'm not going to leave you until I have fulfilled this prophecy I'm giving you. So Jacob wakes up, and he says, surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not, and he was afraid. Same shurish as for awe, and he goes, how full of awe is this place? He's afraid, but he initially is afraid, but it quickly becomes a sense of awe because he realizes, wow, I'm in God's place, and God is here, and I'm at the gate where there's between heaven and earth. So what's interesting about this pasuk, what's interesting about this line here, is that it shows the transition from fear to awe. Initially, he's overwhelmed as like a mortal being. Whoa, God was just speaking to me. But then he realizes, how great is that? God spoke to me, and God's with me. So quickly it became awe, and he named the place Beit Kel. Okay, and then he goes into the vow, which we're going to stop here. Okay, now, let's go back to sharing this. Very good stuff. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about this experience that Jacob had, which I'm nicknaming Power to the People here, because God is empowering us and all of humanity through us with this vision. And just as we got into in depth with Avraham last week, we're going to talk a little bit more about Jacob in depth. And we're going to use a book called Homo Mysticus by Rabbi Chacham Joseph Haor, who unfortunately became nifter, died about a month or two ago. In my opinion, he's certainly a Gadol Hador. He certainly was a great scholar of his generation. And you can see here all the great credentials he has. He was the first Jew to be graduated from a Spanish university since the expulsion of 1492. That happened in 1961. And if you read his books, you see his command of Tanakh and Gemara and Mishnah and Halacha. And not only that, his command of psychology and sociology and history and English. And he spoke all these languages. He was astounding. And he had all these various teaching positions. And there's more on him in the website, on the website in the About section. Okay. Okay. Okay, by the way, for those that follow kashrut.org, by the Abadi family out of Lakewood, he was ordained as a Dayan by Chacham, by the grandfather Abadi. So the grandsons today are the Abadis in Lakewood. Okay, so this guy has a lot of credentials. Okay, so let's talk about what he says. This book, Homo Mysticus, is Chacham Haor's guide to Moreh Nevuchim, to the Guide for the Perplexed, the Rambam's Guide for the Perplexed, which is quite a complicated book. This guide to the guide is a very complicated book, but Chacham Haor realized that people need to have some hashkafat, a perspective, when they're reading the Rambam, and he's providing it. So I get a bunch of it. He's also bringing in other sources beside the Rambam when he talks about what the Rambam is saying, okay? And fortunately for us, there's a passage where he talks about this latter dream that Jacob had. Okay, what does he say? He says this: Jacob's vision of God's angels going up and down the ladder that joins heaven and earth in the passage we just read is the biblical model for prophecy. The biblical model for prophecy, meaning, if you want to know the core way that the Bible describes prophecy, this is it. This experience that Jacob had is it. The ultimate mystical experience. You know, another scholar says that because these angels first ascend and then descend to heaven, they cannot be celestial beings. It's not as if angels from heaven are coming down. The Lashon, the language, talked about ascension first, okay? Rather, they are humans ascending with their minds to heaven and then proceeding to bring their vision down to earth. Not humans climbing a ladder, humans having a meditative experience and bringing truth down to earth, so to speak. The source of this idea is the Talmudic doctrine identifying the rabbinic scholar with the ministering angels. Significantly, the latter is first established on earth, wherefore it reaches heaven, and not the other way around. Reflecting the original sense of the term, these angels are God's messengers, people serving as the conduit effecting his designs on earth. The Rambam identified these angels with the prophets. This leads to the fundamental distinction between the personal perfection of a member of the scholarly community and that of a prophet. So basically, he's saying that Jacob became a prophet through this prophetic vision, and he came across ideas and visions and truth which he brought down to earth. And Hakam Fa'or is saying that the Rambam is saying that this gives us a model of what a prophet is, as opposed to somebody who's simply seeking personal perfection. What is the difference? A person who seeks personal perfection, the divine flow touches his intellect, but not his imagination. He tries to reach the highest possible point of the ladder and to linger up there. So somebody who's just interested in his personal enlightenment, his own personal spirituality, just wants to get to heaven, so to speak. He wants to have a mystical experience achieved through meditation so that he can remain in the clouds. But as God's messengers, the ultimate goal of the prophets is to bring their vision down to earth. They can go into the celestial skies, and whatever truth they get, though, has to be brought down to everyday life. The prophet's final objective is not heaven, but taking the heavenly vision down to earth. Thus, the prophetic vision is integral to the community of Israel. They have to be among all the various parts of the society. The uneducated, the common folk, the townspeople, the sages, they all interact and form an organic unit. And these are the people that the prophet has to interact with. And then he says, in this specific sense, prophecy is essentially political. So he's saying that the prophet, after he has this huge mystical experience, has to come bring his truth down to earth and mix with people on an everyday basis and speak the truth and try to influence them, as Abraham did, as we discussed last week. He was constantly lobbying, petitioning, and discussing and persuading with people. You guys got it wrong. You know, these trees are not gods here. There's one God, and you can't see him. So this is the mission of the prophet, to become a political being. Okay. Because after ascending and reaching a definite echelon in the ladder, what was perceived must be brought down to lead and teach the inhabitants of the earth. And that's why, as we read about the prophets, these prophets weren't guys that hung out in a cave for 18 years. They were involved in everyday Jewish life, saying, come on, you guys gotta ratchet up your game here. They use their truth as a signpost. This is where you guys got to reach. You're falling short. Okay. Their purpose is not to hang around heaven, but to bring down a message that will enhance the condition on earth. Okay. And he then finishes up this section by contrasting Elijah with his student Elisha. Elijah, even though Elisha was very involved in the community, he's held as a guy who is first and foremost interested in his own elevation, and that's why his prophecies are held to be the highest form of prophetic vision, hugely mystical experiences. But his chief student Elisha was somebody who took these truths and into everyday life. And, you know, we have the story about him healing the boy, resuscitating him from the dead, with all the chakras being connected. So, okay. So Elijah is somebody who kind of epitomizes the personal spiritual perfection. And Elisha, his student, is somebody who took the perfectionness and try to apply it to everyday life with other people. Okay. So this is the awesomeness that we're supposed to be trying to conceive of when we talk about, in particular, when we say Hagadol, Hagibor, Vahanorah, and the Amidah, this kind of awesomeness is what the third word is referring to. The awesomeness of taking a truth and helping other people see that truth. Okay. 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 Questions on that? Okay. So before we meditate, we will talk about the questions that have been posed from prior times. Okay, first one is, Abraham certainly was a critical thinker, as we talked about last week. He grew up in this culture of idol worship where there was all kinds of false gods, and that's what his family taught him. And with his own brain, with his own ability to get into a state where he could look behind the scenes, he said, "No, this is not right." And he came up with the truth about the real God who's controlling all the stars and planets that the people at that time were worshiping. And he said, "No, you guys got it wrong. You're confusing the messengers with the message. God's the one controlling those people." Yeah, definitely fits the bill of critical thinking. Second question: if your Sifu, meaning me, as a Kung Fu instructor, sees my belly rising and falling as I take breaths, does it count as movement? We talked last week about that the classical meditation requires no movement. You can't just sit there and fidget and adjust. That's the way I was trained. And as we're learning from other classical teachers, that's what meditation is. You have to keep your body at rest and still, so you don't have to worry about it, and be able to focus on what's in your mind. Okay, so does that include the autonomic stuff like breathing? No, you got to breathe. Okay, you can't just sit there holding your breath. So if your instructor is watching you meditate and he sees your midsection or your chest going in and out, you're breathing. Okay, but you have to understand that if you're successfully meditating, you get very quiet and your breathing slows and it's barely perceptible. If you're still breathing as you usually do when you're meditating, you haven't reached any kind of depth. If your breathing slows and you become much more relaxed, then you have reached a depth. So at some point, it may not be perceptible unless you really look for it. Okay, I'm going to answer this third one as well, the same idea. You've only talked about movement, not sound. If you make a sound during religious prayer or in your Kung Fu test, is that considered a distraction? Okay. You can't sit there and stifling a sneeze. Okay. Your autonomic stuff goes on, but I will say this. The way you're supposed to do meditation and keeping your body still and not have any excess movement is, if you sneeze, you got to sneeze. But unfortunately, if after that you need a tissue, you don't reach for the tissue, if you understand what I'm saying. Okay, in my training, if you're getting tested for meditation and you sneeze and then you want to get a tissue, you fail the test. Now, that's when things are on the line. If you're sitting at home and you're meditating and you sneeze, and like, oh, forget it, I need a tissue. Fine, get a tissue. Then start over again. Okay, and try to go for a point where you have an extended period without moving. You got to do what you got to do. Sometimes when you meditate, if you haven't positioned your tongue correctly, or maybe if you've drunk a lot of fluids, you will have a buildup of saliva in your mouth, and sometimes you drool like a baby. If you're getting tested for meditation for some reason, or if you want to give yourself a test, you don't move. And there you sit there drooling like a baby. Okay, if you're being tested and you move, you're going to fail the test. If you're sitting home and you're not getting tested and you drank too much before you meditated and you have this buildup of saliva, so then, okay, then you start over again. Okay. Now, parenthetical to this, there's a kosher autonomic movement and there's a non-kosher. This is what I mean. One time in my school, a very advanced student had to sit for a very long time for meditation, and he decided to sit on a cushion, but it wasn't really a cushion. We have these big, fat, like punching bags that somebody holds, another guy punches it. And it's cushiony. It's not rock hard. It has a little bit of give. And for whatever dumb reason, this man decided to sit on that. And he's sitting on it for a longer period of time. And it gives a little bit. It kind of like sunk a little bit and then threw him off balance. And he had to catch himself from falling. So the falling off balance was natural because he chose the wrong cushion. And he had to catch himself, and Sifu failed him. He goes, you can't do that. And it's because you got to know better. You can't just, if you're sitting and you want to meditate, don't sit on something that's going to make you move. And we were all like, how could the guy do this? But he did it. So 6 months later, he was able to take the test again, and obviously chose another cushion, and he passed it. Good for him. All right, so that's an example. These are things that are preventable. Okay. 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 We'll finish up by going over some of the rules of the meditation with Bhante Gunaratana, the person I introduced to you last week. He is a world-renowned teacher of mindfulness meditation. So let's review what he says. Okay, as a reminder, he says, with whatever posture you choose in meditation, there's three purposes of the posture. One is it provides a stable feeling in the body. So you can remove your attention from such issues as balance and muscular fatigue so that you can send your concentration on the formal object of meditation. Again, the emphasis on forget your body. You can't be fidgeting with your body. So whatever you do, standing, sitting, cushion or not, whatever it is, you've got to be structured and relaxed so that you can forget about your body and not keep adjusting it. Okay. Second, the posture is to promote physical immobility. And if your body is immobile, it helps you get your mind immobile. In this case, the mind follows the body. Still body, still mind. Third, they give you the ability to sit for a long period of time without yielding to the meditator's three main enemies, which are pain, muscular tension, and falling asleep. Again, right posture, right preparation, you can avoid these problems. Okay. And he emphasizes it's essential to sit with your back straight. And you have a straight line between your hips and your head. Okay. There was one, again, another example. In my school, there was a very advanced student who was meditating, and he had to meditate for a long time. And he made the mistake of not having his back straight. He was a little bit bent over, and he had to spend the entire meditative time in this test fighting to keep himself as straight as he could. He did not have a quality experience meditating, I will tell you that, but he passed the test because he didn't move. But it was a chore to try to not keep from drooping, this kind of thing. So if you're going to meditate for a long time and you don't have the right posture, it's going to work against you. Okay, at least he passed, but he would have benefited so much more had his back been straight, and he wouldn't have had to worry about maintaining the structure. Okay. Clothing. The clothes you wear for meditation should be loose and soft. If they restrict blood flow or put pressure on nerves, the result will be pain and or tingling numbness that we normally refer to as legs going to sleep. If you're wearing a belt, loosen it. You don't wear tight pants or material, long skirts, whatever it is. Martial arts clothing is always great. Soft robes. By the way, the people in India and so on, as you'll notice, a lot of times, especially the women, are wearing these long flowing robes and gowns. One reason is because these folks meditate a lot. And just like we'll be sitting around in an airport or someplace or a lobby and we'll get onto our phone, they're going to be meditating. They take advantage of every opportunity, so they always wear clothing that makes it easy for them to assume a meditative posture. Okay. And finally, a chair. Sitting on the floor may not be feasible for you because of pain or some other reason. You can always use a chair. Level seat and so on. I use a chair. But you have to sit, you don't sit back like this. You sit at the edge of the chair. So you're so a straight position. Okay. In all the above postures, remember your objectives. You want to achieve a state of complete physical stillness, but you don't want to fall asleep. Recall the analogy of muddy water. You want to promote a totally settled state of the body, which will engender a corresponding mental settling. There must be also a state of physical alertness, so that will induce mental alertness. Okay, your body is a tool for creating desired mental states. Okay, that answers a lot of the questions about what to do with your body. If you fidget with your body, your mind's going to be fidgeting. Okay. I'm going to now, I'm going to save the rest of this for next week because I don't want to eat up too much time. I want us to be able to meditate. So we're going to stop the recording.